lordy, it's a hot one. Hi everyone, Bigthany Temperatano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Avalanches album, Wildflower. Legendary Plunderphonics powerhouse, the Avalanches are back 16 years since the release of their seminal debut full-length album, Since I Left You in 2000. Now, for years, there's been talk of this new record surfacing. It's been put off again and again and again, material thrown out, re-recorded. Finally, the tension started to break when the Avalanches dropped a teaser track from this project, FRANKIE SINATRA, featuring verses from MF Doom and Danny Brown. Personally, a little underwhelmed by the track, but only when I heard the incredibly subpar YouTube mix. I thought the song sample-wise was really fun and kooky, the same blend of hip-hop and a variety of different music styles that I would expect from the Avalanches, but with a couple surprise verses. And after that, I was relatively interested in hearing some of the other vocal guests who happened to land on this record, people like Josh Tillman, aka Father John Misty, Toro y Moi, also Camp Lo, Ariel Pink, and even Biz Markie. Also, Danny Brown had another feature on this thing, on the short but punchy and very memorable cut, The Wazard of Is. In some ways, this album is the Avalanches as they have always been. Their very eclectic and smooth sampling style is still very much alive on this album, and I think it makes sense to keep it alive, especially given that in this day and age, sample-based music is so relevant, especially with things like hip-hop and EDM leading the musical zeitgeist at the moment. But I'm also surprised at how little these songs have in common with the instrumental hip-hop style that the Avalanches are known for. A lot of cuts on Wildflower are actually pretty easygoing and psychedelic, not so much beat-heavy, funky. Instead, these heavy rhythms are being replaced with lavish pieces of arranged instrumentation on tracks like Colors and Live a Lifetime Love. In a way, this album really lives up to the name of the record because I feel like I am in the middle of a dream state and I'm floating through a field of wildflowers. I feel like I'm locked into some kind of Plunderphonics musical where people at any moment can break into sample-based song and there are cartoon birds like landing on my shoulder. Tweet, tweet. If the Avalanches' first record in the 2000s was influenced by artists like the Beastie Boys and De La Soul, this new record over here feels like it's pulling from the neo-psych movement coming out of Australia right now. And overall, it's a pretty interesting transition, but occasionally the album is so easygoing and so soft and so pleasant that the music is kind of toothless, like on the very soft and slightly forgettable I Wish I Was a Folk Star featuring Toro y Moi, or the overly repetitive track Sunshine, or the very smooth and light disco groove and spoken word passages on the track Saturday Night Inside Out, a really unsatisfying closer to the project. Actually, with the exception of the track Kaleidoscopic Lovers, I would say the whole last quarter of this album is a bit of a letdown. But before this kind of drab point in the album, there are plenty of creative highlights. The song Because I'm Me is this uplifting, funky intro. Sounds like something out of a Jackson 5 record with its soaring string sections and really direct, nimble bass line. Some great verses from Camp Lo. And the steady disco groove and the glistening other instrumentation, most notably chimes on the song Subways, are pretty nice, even if I don't really care for the lazy lead kid vocals on the track, which fit much better into the post-punky Chandra EP that they originally came from, though it was kind of interesting to hear that post-punk gem revitalized and recontextualized on this record. And the song Colors is another highlight for me because it's this beautiful starburst of kaleidoscopic bliss. And then there's also the cut featuring Biz Markie, the Noisy Eater, which was not only one of the more creative tracks on the entire record, loaded with textures and vocal snippets. I mean, it's really a hilarious collage of sounds with Biz Markie on top, rapping about food, rapping about eating. He sounds like a hungry cartoon bear stomping through the forest looking for some grub. And another thing I could say that is good about this record record is that I like the way it flows. A lot of the tracks segue into one another, so it feels like a really holistic experience. But some of these transitional moments are not that great. Like, they don't really add that much momentum to the record, or they're not that interesting, such as on the song Going Home, which sounds like I'm flipping through the radio dial for a better song, or on the song Living Underwater, which makes me feel like I'm sitting in a waiting room hoping I get called next for my appointment with something more interesting. And too often this is the case, that there are tracks, that there are transitional tracks on this record that just sort of feel like they're hanging in the background. They're not all that engaging, they're not all that punchy. Sometimes there's just too little meat and too much of a blissful, psychedelic aura around this record. Still though, despite those complaints, I do think most of this album is good. There's plenty of highlights, there's good material here, and I think generally this album is a really creative attempt to sort of create sample-based psychedelia. I mean, not entirely revolutionary here. I mean, groups like Animal Collective have done just this in the past. Maybe not in a way that was as accessible or as commercial as this, but still. The only other thing I can say is that I thought this record was good, and that I hope that it doesn't take us 16 more years until we hear another Avalanches record, because I think the group is definitely on to something here. As hyped as I was for this record, I can't really expect a group to come back and just be pedal to the floor, blazing and amazing with a 16-year gap in between two albums. There are going to be a lot of kinks to work out in that scenario, especially since the Avalanches have returned as a trio on this record. Now, a lot of those kinks don't seem to have turned up on this record, despite the fact that they totally reinvented their sound on this thing, and that's really admirable. I'm just hoping that in the future they either do something that's altogether new and exciting, just as exciting as their debut record, or they continue down this path but find a balance between these gorgeously arranged instrumental passages and the punchy, rhythmic, sample-based sound that they're known for. I'm feeling a light 7 on this project. Transition. Have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like. If you like, please subscribe, and please don't cry if you happen to love this Avalanches record way more than I do. Yeah, the Avalanches, Wildflower, forever.